Before my family and I moved to another state, my father went and visited the area to check on the progress of our new house, which was being built. My father was there for a few days and was staying at some crappy Motel 6 in a shady area of town. His room was the last room at the end of the hallway on the top floor. In the middle of the night, on the last night he was in town, he was woken by the phone ringing in his room. He groggily answers. It was the front desk, and they say something along the lines of,
"Sorry to wake you, but we've been receiving a couple of reports about rooms being broken into and some stuff being swiped. We are calling to make sure you lock your door and are safe."
My father replies that he is fine and hangs up. He decides to go double check that he locked the door. As he sits up in bed, he notices that the door in his room is ajar. Being spooked, he cautiously checks the room and finds that nothing is missing and no one else is in the room. He creeps to the door and peeks out. Sitting right outside his room on the windowsill of the hallway window is his shaving kit. Creeped out of his mind, he quickly grabs it and locks the door. After he calms down a bit, he calls down to the front desk and says, "Hey, you just called me about the break-ins around the hotel, and I just want to report that my room was broken into when I was sleeping. Nothing taken and I'm fine. Figured you'd like to know." The front desk replies,
"You must be mistaken. We never called your room, and we haven't received any reports of break-ins."
One of my brothers worked security in one of New York City's most upscale hotels. The security desk received a frantic call during one of his night shifts. A guy was calling, all freaked out that his wife was in the bath and was not breathing. My brother and another security guard rushed upstairs to the room. Sure enough, they found a woman in the tub, and she was unresponsive. My brother and the other security guard got her out of the tub and attempted CPR. In the interim, during resuscitation attempts, the NYPD arrived. They told my brother to stop CPR because the lady was obviously dead and, in their opinion, had been for a couple of hours. The husband was questioned extensively. He told law enforcement that he and his wife had a fight earlier in the evening. He went out on his own, and when he came back, his wife was in the bath. He says he went to bed at that point, but later became concerned when his wife didn't come to bed. Privately, among all those present, the general consensus was that the husband had something to do with it, but it couldn't be proven. A couple of weeks later, the room was again made available to guests, and of course the incident was not mentioned. A woman who frequently stayed at the hotel made a reservation for a week and was assigned to that room. She was the first person to stay in the room since the incident. She came to the front desk first thing in the morning, very upset, and with all of her luggage in tow. She said that she was canceling the rest of her reservation and that she would never be staying in the hotel again. She said that she did not sleep the entire night and that the room was haunted. No one at the hotel had mentioned to her what had previously transpired in the room. While my brother worked there, every guest who stayed in the room called about strange going-ons, and many asked to be switched to another room. I was in India for work, staying at a fairly nice hotel. I don't do this often. I usually like to head straight to the room and order room service while watching a movie, but I decided to have a drink at the lobby bar. I had a drink on my own. There was no one else around the bar, and I made small talk with the bartender. I ordered another drink and decided to use the bathroom. I was gone a couple of minutes. When I got back, I noticed that my drink, which was a Scotch and Dry, had a cloudy white rim at the top, which isn't normally there. On closer inspection, the cloudy froth was settling into a powdery residue on the side of the glass. I was suspicious now and kept at it until he acknowledged he saw something. I mean, it was obvious. There was this 2 to 3 millimeter froth around the glass. Then he said that it always happens and it's nothing. I then looked at him directly in his eyes and asked, did he put anything in my drink? It's hard to explain, but his response, though it was a no, told me everything I needed to know. So I made out like I was more curious than anything and asked him whether he would taste it. He said no and said he would pour me another. I declined and said I would drink it, but I just wanted him to tell me if it was off or not. All this while, there was this awkward vibe where we both knew the jig was up, but we were pretending like this wasn't happening. I paid up and left the drink where it was, locked and latched my room, the whole time picturing myself lying in a bath of ice. In the late 90s, my family and I were taking a family vacation on the small tropical island of Guam one summer, and around noon we decided to go have lunch. All that morning, my sister and I were playing and running around the resort hotel we were staying at, so we were a bit filthy. My mom tells us to go to our room and to quickly shower and change clothes, while her and my older brother wait for us in the lobby. So we go to our room, which is on the ground floor by the way, and we take turns showering and getting dressed, and then we started to head out. As soon as we step out of the door and close it behind us, a huge chunk of ice about the size of a football falls about 8 feet in front of us on the grassy area right outside of our room. Me and my sister freeze, look at each other, and then ask, what just happened? So we stepped out onto the grass to inspect it, and sure enough, it's a huge chunk of ice. We look up, and on this 100+ degree day on a tropical island on the South Pacific, and there was not a cloud in the sky. We go to the lobby and tell our mom, but she doesn't believe us, so we go to lunch and continue on with our day. The next day, me and my sister tell the receptionist at the lobby about it, and she turns white. We asked her what's wrong, and she tells us that in the Guamanian culture, a block of falling ice from the sky is some sort of bad omen. We thought she was messing with us, but the other people who worked the lobby confirmed it. My grandmother's entire life, she had a recurring nightmare. In this nightmare, she would be walking down a long dark hallway, turn to the left, open a door, and see something terrible. She'd always wake up before seeing what it was. In her 40s, she, her husband, my dad, and my aunt were on vacation. They booked the hotel at the last minute, so they ended up having to get 2 rooms with 2 twin beds on opposite sides of the floor. My dad wakes up at around 3 a.m. and can automatically tell something's not right. He calls out in the darkness, "Dad?" No response. He turns on the bedside light. "Dad?" he says, a little louder this time. Still no response. Getting worried, he slides out of bed and shakes his father. He doesn't wake up. My dad ran down the hotel hallway to my grandma's room and started banging on the door. My grandma worriedly opens the door, and my dad shouts, "Something's wrong with Dad." He leads her down the hallway, a long hallway, to the last door on the left. My grandmother reaches the door, turns to the left, and sees her husband dead in bed, died from a heart attack. She never had the dream again. This one happened to my parents about 20 years ago now. Both of them were driving out to Death Valley to a hotel for the weekend in the wintertime, and they had left late in the day and were going to arrive at the hotel at night. The hotel was about 30 minutes outside of the actual Death Valley town center, and when they finally found the place, it was completely abandoned. My mom gets spooked easily and didn't want to go and look, but my dad is into that sort of stuff and got out of the car. Right after he walks around the back of the building to look around, a man approaches my mother's side of the car. He claims his motorcycle broke down and that he delivers newspapers to Death Valley. My mom looks around, sees no motorcycle anywhere, and this hotel had nothing near it, not one building. This guy was begging my mom to come get the newspapers and take them to a hotel in town. Otherwise, he'd lose his job. He had the stack in his hands and wanted her to open the door so that he could give them to her. My mom's getting serious vibes from this guy now and refuses, locks all the doors and tells him to go away. He continues to beg. Finally, my dad comes around the corner and the guy panics a bit and just hands them over to my dad quickly and leaves. They drive off, and they spot the guy start walking off into the desert. They finally get to the hotel to deliver the papers and end up booking a room there. When they hand over the newspapers, the lady at the desk tells them they don't get any newspapers delivered to the hotel. My parents open up the stack and look at the front page. It's a newspaper from 1954. When I was around 18 or so, I had been living in a hotel with my mother and sister. We had lost most of our house to a fire 2 years prior and had been living at an extended stay temporarily. We chose this particular hotel because of its location. It was rather close to our school and where my mother worked at the time, so it seemed like the right choice. Now, what makes this location so interesting is the fact that it's located in the Meadowlands, famous for housing Giant Stadium. For those of you who aren't so familiar with the setting, the Meadowlands are mostly swamps and marsh fields. Way back when, before redevelopment on the area began, it was mostly pig farms, so it was safe to say that if you were up to no good and needed to get rid of something, you were here. Hazardous materials, broken down vehicles, even cadavers were left to rot in the murky waters of the various swamps. So, with that little bit of back history, I now continue on to my own little tale. I had woken up from what seemed like an average dream, gasping for air. The inhales were loud enough to wake my mother up, who slept in the bed beside me. After a few minutes, I finally regained my composure. I couldn't figure it out, but I had stopped breathing. My mother turns to me and asks if I was all right. I reassure her that everything is fine and tell her to go back to bed. At this point, I'm wide awake, but decide that I need to go back to sleep since it was rather late and I had class the next day. I lay my head back onto my pillow, and as soon as I feel the cold fabric touch the back of my head, I felt something else that I would never forget. The unmistakable touch of a finger tapping on my forehead. 2 quick taps. It came fast and felt harsh. I quickly rose and scanned the area and saw nothing. My mother and sister were lying down, sleeping. No one else but us 3 in the room. I began to freak out and turn on all the lights, waking up my family. They asked me what's wrong. I explained the story to them, but they write it off as a dream. My mother had seemed to have forgotten already that she had already woken up by my odd gasp for air. For the rest of the night, I sat up leaning across the bed frame, observing the room until my body couldn't take it anymore. I was too exhausted from lack of sleep and a shock to the system that occurred twice in one night. I was ready for bed, but as I sat there, dozing off into a sleep my body was screaming for, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wanted my attention. I used to be a security guard on a campus that was a military fort since the Revolution. It was updated throughout the years and was last used in World War II, which by then, the campus was bristling with artillery and earth and concrete bunkers, as well as many brick and mortar buildings. When it became a college campus, the barracks, hospital, officer's house, and everything was converted to classrooms and dorms. There was one building on campus, a hotel where students learned bartending and hotel services, that was infamous for being haunted. My shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Starting at midnight, the last coworker left and I had the entire campus to myself. My job was to make sure everything was locked and lights were off, and to scare off any drunks or potheads trying to get into the old concrete bunkers. But that hotel, it rarely had living guests. I would go through the building and turn off all the lights, only to turn around an hour later and see a light on again. I would stand in the hotel lobby after patrolling and confirming I was alone and hear things moving on the floor above me. I heard a chain dragging across the room above me, then a distant scream. One night, I had another officer with me for once, and as we were talking in the lobby, the temperature dropped and we heard a little girl giggling. In the basement, I would see shadows dart across the conference room. However, the biggest thing that made me nope out was when I was in the lobby and looked up the staircase. I saw a woman's legs with black shoes walk from the right to left on the next floor up and straight through a wall. "4 years ago, My friend and I decided that we wanted to do a weekend out of town for her birthday. So the two of us and her mom decided to go to Jefferson, Texas. After going around and looking at the historic town all day, we go back to our hotel, which was the Jefferson Hotel. It was pretty late at this point, probably around 1 a.m. There were 2 queen-size beds in the room. My friend and I took the one by the window, and her mom took the one by the door. After lying in bed for a while, I feel something touching the tops of my feet and lower legs. I joke with my friend to stop touching my feet and that I'm trying to go to sleep. She said, "I'm not touching you, go to bed," all while I'm still feeling something touching me. So I say, "No, for real, I can feel you touching my legs." She then kicks her arms and legs up and says, "Look, I'm not touching you." I instantly freeze and could barely talk because whatever it was still touching my legs, almost like running your hands down someone's legs from the foot of the bed. She gets up, and I could still feel it up until she gets around to the foot of the bed. She inspects and finds nothing that could have been doing it. Needless to say, I spent the whole night awake in the fetal position, cuddling her for dear life. The craziest part of the whole thing was that in the morning, my friend's mom called her friend that was supposed to come with us but couldn't. She started off the conversation by asking what room we ended up staying in. Her mom said room 17. The lady responded, "Oh well, my son and I stayed in that room when we were there before, but he won't stay in that room ever again because he felt something grabbing at his legs all night long." What is up, you guys? Hope you enjoyed those creepy hotel stories. Yes, hotels can be creepy. Different types of people staying in those hotel rooms every year. So that's a lot of energy going in and out of those places. Let me know what you think, leave a comment, and thank you for subscribing here on Fairy Tale Phobia. There's been a surge in subscribers, so I really appreciate all you guys out there. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe and stay tuned for more scary stories right here on Fairy Tale Phobia. Till next time, take care and stay scared.